What's up everybody, welcome to already the 10th episode of the KTM 250 rebuild. I'm very happy to tell that the channel almost reached 50 subscribers. There goes a lot of time in making these videos. So thanks everybody, it helps out a lot and it would be awesome to hit 50 subscribers before the next episode. In the previous episode we cleaned the carburetor and changed the jetting, after which we installed it on the bike with a new throttle cable. And in this episode we will proceed assembling the bike. We will install the handlebars, the throttle house, the hydraulic clutch and both the brake systems, so the front and the rear brake. So let's get started. So I organized some parts that I want to install in this episode. We're first going to start with the handlebars. After that we can place the clutch together with all the cabling and the hour counter. As well we're going to place both brake systems, so the front and the rear brake system. And we're going to start off with placing the handlebars so we can attach all the levers to it and as well the throttle house. So I cleaned the handlebars with some brake cleaner just to make sure that all the dust is off here and the throttle can slide over here nice and easy. To install the handlebars I marked them a little bit with a small screwdriver, so that I know the exact position in which they were before I took them off. So we can just place them in the exact position again. So first I'm placing all the bolts in here and then I can position it the way it needs to be. We're going to tighten them now. First I will drive all the bolts in. So when they're all in, you can just reposition it a little bit. Don't tighten them too much, so you can afterwards just tighten everything on the right torque. So the essential things like the triple clamps and the handlebar, I always like to do them on the right torque, and I just looked them up in the KTM manual. So these bolts need to be on 20 Newton meters. So that's it. So now we can place the throttle house. I just unscrewed these bolts a little bit and then we can place it over there. So when you're placing it on the handlebars, you need to make sure that you don't place it too far on the handlebars, because otherwise the end of the throttle tube is against the handlebars and that will create friction and you won't have a smooth throttle. So what I always do is just put it all the way on there as far as you can and then place it a little bit back so you can feel a little bit of play to the outside. So it just needs to be a little bit and that's enough. Then we're going to tighten it a little bit. It's 5 Newton meters, so if you want to do it at the exact torque, you can do that. This looks good. So now we're going to adjust the play on the throttle tube. As you can see, it's moving quite a lot. For that we can just turn this one out. So you can just unscrew this one first a little bit and then take the nut to secure it a little bit off the side and then you can move it by hand. So you're going to turn this completely out till the point that you're not really able to feel any play on the throttle tube. So that means when you pull it backwards, you immediately feel the stress of the cable on there. And from that point on, you're just going to turn it back inward a little bit to make sure that there is enough play on here. This feels quite good. I can hold my finger here and then you can see how much it's turning. So it's only like a few millimeters, I think 3 or 4 millimeters at this point. So here it's a lot less. And then we're going to turn the nut back to make sure that it's secured and it stays in place. Then we can place the rubber over here. Just like that. This feels quite good. Nice and smooth again. So I'm just using a screwdriver to secure these because they only need 5 Newton meters and with the screwdriver that should be enough. So now let's place the clutch together with all the cabling, the ignition and the hour counter. And here we have the connector that runs through to the control unit and the connector that will connect to the engine. So first I'm going to put the clutch lever in place. I clean the inside so we can place it nice and easy. So we're not going to tighten it, so we can still move it around a little bit. So the cables need to run in between the front suspension and the frame. So I could barely get the ignition coil in between here. So I would recommend to do this before you place the front suspension. So our counter needs to go there. Then we have a clip that can go in here. So we'll just leave everything hanging for a little bit. So then we can place the hour counter. So I read that these bolts only need 1 Newton meter, so don't put too much force on them, just tighten them a little bit. This one needs to go on here like this, and the cable for the control unit needs to run through this part of the frame. So then you have everything like it should run, and the house of the clutch needs to go on here, so the spark plug cap needs to go on here. So we'll just put this on here for the time being, so it stays a little bit in place. So after that we can place both bolts in here. The right side is the easiest one. We don't have to put any connectors in underneath the bolt, so we're just going to tighten that a little bit, put everything in place. After that we need to place this wire on here and the other one as well, and then tighten them all together. Make sure that when you tighten them, that none of them are under big stress, otherwise the wire will break over time. And I will use the KTM tool to tighten them. One thing I forgot to mention is that the back side as well as the front side, all the sides of these connections as well as the frame connection, I cleaned them very good, so the electrical connection is optimal. Now we can place the connector back in here, just like that. So before I took everything here, I cleaned everything, so we'll just check it if there is any dirt on there. As well with the inside, I cleaned that already, so we can just place it in there now. So we'll just push it in nice and straight. And then tighten the bottom 2 bolts. We're just driving them in there and not tightening them, because we still need to place this one as well, but that comes together with the chain guard. So when we're going to place this one, we will tighten them all. So usually you can see where the tie wraps were, so we're just going to place a tie wrap on the same place. Don't tighten them too much, because otherwise you will break the isolation of the wires. You always can play around with it a little bit. So when we need to put everything in place, we can just move it around still. So afterwards we can tighten everything and cut the excess of the tie wraps off. So all the wiring is quite in place. So now we can install the kill switch on the handlebars. Something like that, and then we're going to line up the clutch lever as well. So I will just adjust them the way I would ride with them and then tighten them a little bit. Always make sure that you don't tighten them too much, because if you fall you don't want to break everything, but you want it to fold away, and then you can push it back before you ride again after a crash. And now that the clutch lever is in place, we can tighten the kill switch as well. Also not too tight. So now let's place the chain cover. With that we can fully tighten the clutch. So it goes on there like this. So I will first put both a little bit in, but on the bolt on the back side we will put a little bit of Loctite. So that way it's at the right angle. Okay, then I will tighten the bolts with the KTM tool, just to make sure that we're not tightening them too much. Then we can tighten the back one as well. This is an M8 bolt, so we can tighten that one a little bit more. And with the 13mm range, you can prevent it from turning around when you're tightening it. So now we can start mounting the brake systems. So we will begin with the front brake. I cleaned both the brake calipers and took them apart. So basically what you do is take these clips out, get this pen out, and then you can release the brake pads. After that you can take the top part and the bottom part apart from each other. Then you have two sliders that you can clean and put some new grease in. So I cleaned both the sliders and then put some new grease on there, and then I put everything back together. So the front brake pads are quite worn already, so maybe I want to replace them, but we can also do that later when it's on the bike. So the same I did with the rear brake caliper, so I cleaned it as well. Just take these clips out and the pen out, after which you can get the brake pads out, and then you can clean everything from the inside and clean the sliders as well. So let's mount the front brake now. So what I will do is first put the brake caliper in place, because that is pulling on the brake line quite a lot. So we'll put the lever over the handlebars, and then it will stay in place. So on these bolts of the brake caliper we're going to put some Loctite as well. So I like to put these ones on the right torque as well. So they need to be on 25 Newton meters. This one needs to go to the inside. So the brake line needs to be on the inside of the front suspension. So now we can tighten the front brake lever on the handlebars. I also cleaned everything from the inside before I placed them. So I'm just going to place them the way I would run them as well. Make sure you don't push the brake lever too much, otherwise the pistons of the brake caliper will fall out, because the front wheel is not in there yet with the brake disc. And then the same as with the clutch lever, just tighten them so it can move around when you fall, and then it doesn't break, then your brake doesn't break. So that's in place as well. So now we're going to place the rear brake. So first we're going to make sure that the brake caliper is attached to the swing arm. So we're going to slide it over this notch. Then we can place the brake cylinder. We have put some Loctite on the bolts, and then we're going to put them in place. And then the bottom one as well. We will just use the KTM tool to tighten them, just to prevent from putting too much force on them. And this will be enough. Then we can place the brake line in the holder. And this will slide along when we are going to adjust the tension of the chain. So now we only need to place the brake lever for the rear brake. We have a ball joint that's attached to the lever and then going in the brake cylinder. So I just turned this ball joint around a little bit and put some grease in there, just to make it move a little bit easier and prevent it from rusting any further. Yeah, let's just put these back. So I'm just going to run it in between here. This bearing needs to line up with this hole at the back of the foot peg, and we need to place the spring through this hole of the clutch cover. So it's quite easy to do when the whole brake lever is hanging loose. So now we're going to put the bolt through. Like that, and then we will put some Loctite on in the nut. We can place it on the back of the bolt. So the original Torx of KTM is T45. So we're just going to keep it in the same place and then tighten the nut on the back side. First we can tighten it like this. And then you're always supposed to tighten the nut on the back side. So I believe this bolt needs to have 35 Newton meters, so that's quite a lot. And with a single wrench, that's quite difficult to do. So usually what I will do is just, it's not a very professional way, but it works because I cannot get the ratchet or a torque wrench behind here. So I will just put the wrench on here like this and attach the ring side of another wrench in here. So you can have so then you have a bigger arm to put your pressure on. So I think that's enough. So now the only thing we need to do is put some grease on this pen. So then we will place this pen in the brake cylinder, and you need to make sure that this rubber goes into this edge of the pen, so it will stay in place and no dirt can go in. So you need to work this rubber a little bit down, and then we're going to place the bolt with some Loctite. And then because we don't have the rear wheel with the brake disc in here, make sure that you hold the brake lever up while tightening it, otherwise the pistons of your brake caliper will fall out. So by the way, all the M6 bolts, they need to have a torque of 10 Newton meter. So usually with the KTM tool that's enough. And if you want to do it completely correct, you can always use a torque wrench to do all those bolts. And if you don't know one of the bolts or the torque for one of the bolts, then you can just look it up in the manual of KTM. They have all the right torques for every bolt described. So now this is in place as well. So the only thing I will do is just put a small tie wrap here on this this spot to keep everything a little bit more together. This way we can put this a little bit inside as well. Not too tight, just to hold it a little bit in place. And then when we are going to place the fuel tank, we need to place this rubber to support it, and as well to hold all the cables together. But that's for a later episode. And we will cut the excess of the tie wraps off. I always like to point the end of the tie wrap to a place where we can't see it. A little detail, but it looks a bit nicer. So we have the handlebars back in place, together with the throttle house, the front brake, the clutch with the housing on the engine. So as well all the wiring, we placed it back, and the hour counter on top of the triple clamp. And the last thing we did was placing back the rear brake. So to make sure that all the cables and the clutch and brake line run completely in the right way, we need to place all the other parts as well to see if everything comes together correctly. So it's a little bit difficult to see now, but I think we managed to place them in the correct spot. So but we will see when we place all the other parts. That was all for this episode. If you liked the content, don't forget to like the video. In the next episode we will review the new wheels. We will install them, and as well we will install the subframe with a new filter box. So make sure to subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss this episode. And as always, thanks for watching and see you next time.